Okay, lastly, we are going to talk about how do we name binary compounds. First off, what is a binary compound? Well, it is a covalent compound that has two elements in it. Okay, binary just means that there are two and only two elements involved. So you will not be naming compounds with 3 or 4 elements, just compounds with 2 elements. That's what binary is. And they tend to be the covalently bonded compounds. So how do we write the formula? First off, here's kind of your formula. You write the less electronegative element is written first. So metals before nonmetals. Nonmetals are closer to fluorine. They're more electronegative, so they will always come last. And I think that's what this second bullet says. Oh, if you have 2 nonmetals, then you're going to write the nonmetal further left before the nonmetal further right. If your compound is 2 nonmetals, you look at which one is farther left, you write it first. Which one's further right, you write it second. So here's just some examples. We'll learn how to name these things in just a second. A few more rules. When writing the name, so if we have 2 elements, and you've already figured out which one you need to write first, which one you need to write second, you write the first element in the formula, and we're going to have a prefix, knowing how many of that element do we have. So write the first element and the prefix for the number of atoms. Remember, a prefix is a word that comes before the element name. Here is a list of prefixes. So if we have, let's look at SO3. We have 1 sulfur, 3 oxygens. So we're going to write the less electronegative element first. That's going to be sulfur. It's further away from, well, actually, if we look at a periodic table, it's not further left. Let me erase. Sulfur's not further left, but it is, it's a little further away from fluorine, okay? It's less electronegative. It's got a value of 2.5. Oxygen has a higher electronegativity value. You write the element that's less electronegative first. That's why sulfur comes first. So we just have 1 sulfur. Now, typically you would write mono, but we actually have an exception for that down here. I'll get to that in a second. So we write the less electronegative element first. Then you write the second element, the more electronegative element, oxygen. And we're going to put the prefix tri, okay, because there's 3 of them, and so the prefix for 3 is tri. All right. Now, the reason we wrote oxide actually brings us to point number 2. Okay, oxygen, we changed the ending to IDE. So it says write the second element in the formula, and you replace the end with IDE, just like we did for anions. So again, going back to sulfur, you have sulfur trioxide. Now, this rule number 3, note the prefix mono is omitted unless it's being used to distinguish between compounds with the same element. For example, carbon monoxide versus carbon dioxide. We have to put mono here because we have the same elements. And so the monoxide helps us understand there's just 1 oxygen versus CO2 is dioxide. So usually we don't write mono, is what that point is saying. But there are certain cases. So if we look at the middle molecule, NO2, so you name the less electronegative element, which here is nitrogen. So we'd say nitrogen, oxygen's going to come second. And then we're going to indicate, we omit mono. We don't write mono, so it's just nitrogen, but we do put the prefix for oxygen. There's 2 of them. So what's the prefix for 2? It is di. So we say prefix, and then we name the second element. Here it's oxygen, but we change the ending to IDE. So to kind of give you the formula, I like to always write this for students. You do the prefix for the first element, and then the element name. Then you do the prefix for the second element, and then you write the element name. Okay, that is the formula. Prefix, first element, prefix, second element. So So we have TiCl4, so it's titanium. We omit mono, so we don't write mono titanium. It's just titanium. And then we have 4 chlorine, so it'd be tetra, and then chloride. You change that ending to IDE. Okay, tetra being the prefix up here for 4. So let's look at, here's a really good example. This was going to be a poll question, but I think we can name them without, obviously I can't do a poll on a video. So we have 2, and we're going to write the first element, the less electronegative element first. That's going to be nitrogen. And the prefix for 2 was di. So di. That's my fridge, everyone. Dinitrogen, and we do not change the ending here. We only change the ending of the second element. Okay? Let me put IDE up here. But not for the first element. So dinitrogen, what's the prefix for 5? Let's go see. 5 is penta. So it'd be dinitrogen. Now, okay, one other exception here. We're going to drop the A. So it's just going to be pentoxide. And this honestly isn't a chemistry rule. This is an English rule. They don't want A and O, 2 vowels next to each other. So anytime you have like oxygen, starts with an O, starts with a vowel, you're going to drop the A on any prefixes that end with A. So if we're looking at which prefixes end with A, that's all of these. So anytime this prefix comes before oxygen, you drop the A. So it will just be pentoxide. Any other time, like if we had N2Br5, it would be dinitrogen pentabromide. So you do keep the A here, you change the ending to IDE, and then you put your prefixes in front of both elements. All right. So here we have BBr3. So B is boron, and we just have 1. But remember, we do not write mono. We omit it most of the time. So it'll be boron. And then we have 3 of the bromine atoms, so, or bromide. What's the prefix for 3? It is tri. So boron tribromide. Sorry, there's an I there. Boron tribromide. Let's do SO3. Remember, we don't write mono if we have 1, so it's just going to be sulfur. Whoops. Again, tri is the prefix for 3, so then trioxide. Okay, what would this one be? We would have sulfur, and we don't write mono, just sulfur. What is the prefix for 6? 6 is hexa. And this element here, fluorine, does not start with a vowel, so we can keep the A. So it'd be hexa, I'm going to dash fluoride. Sulfur hexafluoride. Okay, so let's practice just a few more, and that concludes this video. We have 2 carbons, 3 oxygens. Now, because we have 2, we do need to put the prefix, so it should be dicarbon trioxide. Can you try this one over here, XeF4? I'm going to give you a minute to do it. Go ahead and pause the video and write it. Okay, assuming that you've tried it yourself. Xenon. And we don't write mono, it's just xenon. And then the prefix for 4 is tetrafluoride. Okay, what about P4O8? Pause the video. Try this one yourself. Okay, assuming that you've tried it, the prefix for 4 is tetra, and then phosphorus. And then we have, what's the prefix for 8? Octa. But remember, we dropped the A here because this element starts with a vowel. So it'd be oxide. So this one's weird. Tetraphosphorus oxide. So instead, it's not octa oxide, just oxide. And then lastly, IF7. Try to name that one. Okay, assuming that you've tried it, we have iodine. Remember, we do not change the ending of the first element to IDE. You just keep it, name the element. So iodine. And what is the prefix for 7? It should be heptafluoride. Iodine heptafluoride. So that is how to name binary compounds. I would say make sure you review these rules here and know these rules here. And then when it comes time, I will post extra practice problems of these from the back of chapter